Thomas Jonathan Jackson, also known as Stonewall Jackson, is known for his army actions in the Mexican War, but became a historical figure because of his actions in the Civil War. Jackson was a Confederate general during the Civil War, and even though he was only in the field for 2 years, he became a hero of the Southern cause. Thomas Jackson was born on January 21, 1824, in Clarksburg, Virginia. His family was very poor, and it was hard to maintain even a basic lifestyle with 3 young children. Thomas was only 2 when his father, Jonathan Jackson, and his sister died of typhoid fever. 4 years later, Jackson's mother, Julia Jackson, remarried, but sadly Jackson's new stepfather was financially unable to take care of the children, and they were sent to live with relatives. Within a year, his mother died. In 1842, Jackson was accepted to the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. Since he had formerly lacked a proper education, he struggled with the entrance examinations and began at the bottom of his class. But because Jackson was determined to become successful, he became one of the most hardworking cadets in the academy. Jackson graduated 17th out of the 59 students in the class of 1846. In the beginning of Jackson's United States Army career, he was a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army's 1st Regiment and was sent to fight in the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. It was in Mexico where Jackson first met Robert E. Lee. In 1851, Jackson accepted a teaching position at the Virginia Military Institute. He became professor of natural and experimental philosophy and instructor of artillery. Jackson took his job very seriously and wasn't liked by many students. If a student asked for help for the second time, Jackson would punish him. Although he wasn't admired by his students, many of the African Americans in town, both slaves and free blacks, admired him. They admired him because he was a teacher in Sunday school classes for blacks at the Presbyterian Church. The pastor, Dr. William Spotswood White, described the relationship between Jackson and his Sunday school students. In the religious instruction, he succeeded wonderfully. His discipline was systematic and firm, but very kind. His servants reverenced him and loved him, as they would have done a brother or father. He was emphatically the black man's friend. On July 21, 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run broke out, and the Confederate lines began to waver under pressure from the Union forces. Jackson then ordered his brigade to fight with the discipline he had instilled in them, and they responded by holding their ground. A Confederate brigadier general by the name of Bernard Elliott B. said, "There is Jackson standing like a stone wall. Let us determine to die here, and we will conquer. Rally behind the Virginians." Although we don't know whether this is exactly what B said, as B was killed almost immediately after saying it, this is how Jackson got the nickname Stonewall. After the battle, Jackson was promoted to Major General. In 1862, a Union army of 100,000 was traveling to Richmond from the southeast. Also, General Irvin McDowell with 30,000 men near Fredericksburg were approaching Richmond from the north, and Major General Nathaniel Banks's army threatened the Shenandoah Valley. Jackson was ordered to defeat Banks' threat. Jackson attacked a Union force at Kernstown, but was surprised at how large the Union force was and retreated. This small defeat turned into a large victory, however, because the Union thought Jackson had a much larger force than he did. Jackson moved west into the mountains of the Highland Country, planning to close the back entrance into the valley. On May 8th, learning that another Union army was coming from the north, Jackson moved in that direction and, with help, defeated Federal forces under General Nathaniel Banks. Jackson kept forcing Banks north, and in early June, 2 separate Union armies of 20,000 each moved to unite and trap Jackson. Jackson quickly moved south, missing the trap and avoiding the 2 Union armies who were chasing him on both sides of the Massanutten Mountain, which runs down the Shenandoah Valley. At the Massanutten southern tip, Jackson fought back-to-back battles against the Union armies. After defeating the Union forces, they finally withdrew and Jackson moved east to join General Robert E. Lee in front of Richmond. Jackson and his forces made a surprise appearance at Richmond, in front of Major General George McClellan. Their presence in Richmond essentially forced the Union to retreat. During the 7 days' battles, Jackson's performance was said to be poor. He was frequently late to each battle and seemed to make foolish decisions. Jackson and his troops were completely exhausted from the trip from the Shenandoah Valley, and perhaps because of this, he had performed poorly throughout the 7 days' battles. It has also been said by Longstreet that General Jackson never showed his genius when under the immediate command of General Lee. The Second Battle of Bull Run started when Union General John Pope attacked Jackson's men after Jackson destroyed a large Union Army supply depot. Jackson and his troops were separated from the rest of General Lee's army, but held fast against repeated Union assaults on his position. Generals Lee and Longstreet arrived to the battle later, and Longstreet's maneuver forced Pope to retreat, and the Second Battle of Bull Run was another Confederate victory. After the Second Battle of Bull Run, Jackson successfully held his position against Union assaults at the Battle of Antietam, was promoted to lieutenant general, and had another defensive victory at the Battle of Fredericksburg. At the Battle of Chancellorsville, the Confederate Army was in a vulnerable position, so General Lee decided to try something risky, to turn the tables against the Union Army. He sent General Jackson on a flanking maneuver around the side of General Hooker's Army of the Potomac. Jackson made this move, and sent his cavalry general to find a weakness in the Union position. They found a spot where the Union soldiers had little defense and were playing cards and eating. Jackson led his troops to an overwhelming success, capturing many Union soldiers and forcing the rest into full retreat. Tragically for Jackson, on his return to the Confederate Army lines, his troop was mistaken for Union cavalry and was fired on. He was hit by 3 bullets, 2 in the left arm and 1 in the right hand. He could not get immediate care for his wounds, and his left arm was later amputated. During this time, he contracted pneumonia and died on May 10, 1863. His body is buried at the Stonewall Jackson Memorial Center in Lexington, Virginia. His left arm, however, was buried separately near the field hospital where it was amputated. Stonewall Jackson is considered to be a hero of the Southern War effort, and he has a solid legacy as a remarkable figure from the Civil War. Statues of Jackson are all over the South, and he has been featured in novels, musicals, and movies.